So, Hearn, tell me about the exciting story you're going to do on Eskimo pies.
Well, I decided not to do that story, Dave.
Well, why not?
Well, it's too far and all, you know.
Hearn, I'm a pilot. I'll fly us there. Come on.
No. It's too far away.
Hearn, you know no place is too far for out of control. Now, you know that.
Dave, it's something else.
Well, what is it?
Well, Dave, it's a long story.
So, the May Knickknack series has reached the 1990s, what many consider Nickelodeon's golden age. So let's sit back and imagine it. Let's imagine 1992. A relaxing Saturday watching Rugrats, Nick Arcade, Clarissa Explains It All, Roundhouse, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and of course, that early 90s staple, reruns of Out of Control. Out of Control, the show Nickelodeon would not let go of for some reason. Not only was it a show from 80s Nick, it was a show from early 80s Nick, the last original show commissioned by Cy Schneider before he left the network, premiering in the transitionary period between Silver Ball Nickelodeon and Orange Splat Nickelodeon. And despite it only getting a single 26-episode season, Out of Control hung around for a while. And not in the early 6 a.m. time slot where shows were weaned off the channel, but a solid weekend afternoon slot all the way until March 14th, 1993. I can only speculate as to why. Part of it probably had to do with the huge success of Full House, which elevated Dave Coulier from struggling stand-up comedian and Muppet Babies voice actor to a household name. Incidental star power! Whatever the reason, Out of Control made it a third of the way into the 90s, and is therefore part of the tableau of 90s Nick. So let's take a closer look at a single episode, and see what kids were getting when they weren't getting Salute Your Shorts or Ren and Stimpy. Eskimo Pies, listed online as the show's 17th episode, but who really knows, sees host Dave and reporter Hearn, played by Marty Skiff, in search of the fabled Eskimo Pie. But Hearn is afraid to fly. Oh, don't worry, Hearn. We're just going to film ourselves in a stationary airplane on the ground while the animation does all the work.
Those people down there, they look like ants.
Oh, those are ants, Hearn. We haven't left the ground yet.
You haven't left the ground yet? You mean we're going to go higher?
Oh, yeah.
With Dave out of the studio, stage manager Diz, played by Diz McNally, is left in charge of the show, and she takes the opportunity to revamp the set and gets the carpenters and painters hired in on the show.
Now, first we start with the foundation makeup, the pancake. Just like this. Now, here you are. See, this is the wrong way.
Wrong. Now you're going to do it the right way, right?
Yes. Now we take a little powder in case you're starting to glow. Now get ready, boys. Here. Little powder and for you. Wonderful, wonderful.
And then, Dave and Hearn reach the North Pole, and there's a guy there that gives them a couple of pies to the face.
Oh, you're the guys that are looking for the Eskimo pie.
Yes.
Can we go, Dave?
You're the guys who flew 23,000 miles over desert and frozen wasteland to find the source of the famous Eskimo pie.
I got a bad feeling about this, Dave.
What's wrong with him?
Oh, he's just a little nervous. Cool it, Hearn.
Oh, he looks terrible. But I think I can fix that.
Oh, Dave, come on, let's go. I don't like this. Dave.
With one of these.
Oh, Dave.
Eskimo.
Please.
Pie.
So, look, reviewing comedy is hard, especially the LOL random comedy of something like Out of Control. This episode is a long build-up to a single pie-in-the-face gag, and while I do appreciate a good shaggy dog joke, it requires a consistent momentum that Out of Control has no patience for. Intercutting Dave and Hearn's journey with Diz's nonsense and other shorts like high-speed footage of a kid doing his paper route or desert survival tips, all of that hobbles the pace of the joke. And even after all that, Eskimo Pie, resulting in an indigenous man pieing you in the face, is far too weak of a pun. For the unaware, Eskimo Pies were a brand of chocolate-covered vanilla ice cream treats. Originating in 1921, it was one of, if not the, first ice cream on a stick junk foods. However, it's just a trademarked brand, and not one of those that became a generic term for something like Band-Aids or Jell-O. So you have Dave and Hearn looking for something that any kid can get from their local 7-Eleven. Of course, it was picked because the creators of the show thought getting a pie in the face in the North Pole was a funny visual. But as a pun, it's switching a dessert for a different dessert. You really want a joke like this to be transformative, like, well, say a cow pie. Uh-oh, we all know what a cow pie is, totally gross, uh-oh, and then a guy in a cow costume throws a green pie in your face. Wait, there's a candy called a cow pie? Gosh damn it, writing bad jokes is hard. Of course, it's worth noting that we don't have Eskimo pie anymore. Just last year, the product was rebranded to Eddie's Pie, because Eskimo is a derogatory term. Much in the same way European colonists found dozens of very different Native American cultures and decided, you're all Indians now, so too did the northern indigenous people like Inuit and Yupik become labeled as Eskimos. It's a colonizing term, and one largely unadopted by the indigenous people in question. And that drives home what this episode is. One in a massive pile of derogatory medias that paint indigenous cultures as cartoons. Where do Eskimos live? Cold places? To the North Pole then. And of course we couldn't do this without a bit of red face. Now, do I think this was all done with malice? No, not at all. I think this is just casual ignorance built on generations of casual ignorance. Hey, Looney Tunes did this kind of thing all the time, and those are classics, right? Let's do it ourselves. And the episode does frame Dave and Hearn as fools, and the Eskimo character is the one throwing the pie in the face, so it's not hateful. But what it is othering, taking an actual culture of people and making them into a goofy caricature. From an American perspective, this is harder to recognize than caricatured portrayals of Native Americans or Africans, because there is both a lot of distance and a lot of bad authority on these cultures. As much as our education system would prefer not to, you can't really discuss American history without at least brushing up against Native genocide and African slavery, and we are all presently living in a world built on top of those atrocities. And even then, it's taken a lot of work to get people to acknowledge that maybe naming your sports team after racial slurs and putting white comedians in blackface are actually bad things. From this American perspective, only those living in Alaska may find themselves interacting with Inuit and Yupik cultures, and much of the colonialist damage done falls more on Canada than the United States. So our exposure to northern indigenous cultures come from books and documentaries that have been frequently full of shit. 1922's Nanook of the North was a foundational early work of documentary filmmaking, and gave us a lot of the imagery we commonly associate with Eskimos. And it was largely staged, portrayed Inuit people as less advanced than they actually were, and did a great deal of othering. Even well-meaning works about these cultures are given to us through white authors and filmmakers, these cultures rarely getting the chance to speak for themselves, to tell their own stories. And, of course, this distance and othering means white businessmen feel it's okay to slap a racial caricature on their ice cream bar, and for a children's comedy show in the 1980s to carry over that baggage when making a joke about said ice cream bar. No, I'm not trying to cancel Out of Control. Nobody has cared about Out of Control for 25 years, there's no point in canceling it, but it's worth examining how this kind of lazy racial comedy can come about, and how it can affect our perception of different cultures. I only learned about Eskimo being a derogatory term relatively recently, well into my adulthood. I simply and uncritically assumed that's what these cultures were called, because that's what all the media featuring these cultures claimed they were called, especially children's media like Out of Control. Much in the same way I didn't know Gypsy was a slur against the Romani people, Eskimo was just the name I was taught. And I bet that's true for most of you watching. You're not a bad person for having fallen for this misconception that's been reinforced since childhood. But as adults, it's important to be critical and reappraise how the media we consume informs our perception of the world. I suppose then, as a review, the Eskimo Pies episode of Out of Control is largely unfunny, and the one joke it tries really hard to land is built on cultural parody. I've never grasped why Nickelodeon would hold on to this show for so long. Not that the shows produced in the 1990s didn't have their issues with this kind of thing, but that's a discussion for the future. This was just a sample.